important thing about this graph is also that they are measuring, like they're putting the dot around like the time here, knowing that like not requiring 100% success rate. So it's like a task that the agent can succeed in with like 50% success rate. So maybe like 5 times out of 10, like the attempt will be successful, let's say so, right? So it's also counting in some of the capabilities, some of the domains that are very early stage, let's say, because in general, 50% success rate is not completely enough, right? To have the agents work on some reliable stuff. So this is a very interesting graph because on one hand, of course, it shows the progress that foundational model training has made in several years. Also, of course, infused by the agentic approach and multi-step scaffolding around, complex tasks. But then, does that actually apply to research? Right? It's like when you try to define a research task through that framework of the time that you need to spend, right? It becomes very, very long time horizon probably, right? So let's say what is the time span of a PhD level research, right? Like should we say it's 3 years, right? And it's like, I don't know, it's many years, many years in front of us, right? It's like maybe 2030 or maybe 2050, right? And then a PhD research is like far from the notion of AGI itself, right? So if even the agent will be able to complete the PhD research successfully 50% of time, you would not say, oh, like this is artificial general intelligence. Finally, they just have reached the level of the PhD student, right? So can we actually map that to what's going on in the AI agents for research? Let's talk about that a little bit. But before that, let's also just acknowledge that within the AI research itself, a huge progress have been made around the actual scientific discovery, right? So before 2024, I would say if you have an LLM generated paper that you're trying to submit somewhere, people would generally say that this is just pure fraud, right? There's no good way of claiming that there would be any sort of scientific merit to it because it would be just quasi-scientific text generation, and that's it, right? It will not be grounded in the actual experimental results. It probably will not be grounded in the actual facts. The related work will not be actually connected, right? So all of that has happened before, right? So it's like AI generated or like non-AI, like very, very standard, like Markov chain, old school generation papers have been accepted to scientific journals before, but that has nothing to do with what is going on right now, because right now we're actually creating something that's emulating the full cycle of scientific experiments. And just the end of that is writing a paper. So it's actually grounded in something. So I will be using Sakana AI scientist schema here as an example, because this is a really good example of a full cycle experimentation pipeline for an agent like that, right? It's like many papers now introduce some significant and interesting changes to that. I'm not saying this is a good one, but this is a very standard one that we can use to kind of understand the state of things right now. So generally, a regular AI scientific agent right now has at least 3 stages, where you have the ideation stage, the experimental stage, and the writing stage, right? So it's like the ideation stage, basically, you are trying to explore the idea space, you're trying to outline some of your experimental plans, you're trying to rank some of the ideas that you want to do. Sometimes it's also rooted in like trying to use related work, trying to search related papers, trying to outline the whole space of works that you need to put in context, let's say, to kind of, evaluate the ideas and like create something novel on top of that. But generally, this is very nascent, so nothing very fancy actually happens here. For example, in Sakana AI approach, they just do the LLM idea generation first, and then they try to check through semantic scholar search whether something like that already exists or not. So this is this very simplistic way of trying to approach scientific novelty, right? But then what they do later is the experimental cycle, right? So for the idea that you finally picked, you create an experimental plan, like the steps you need to take. Then you write the code for it, and then you execute the code and you measure the results, right? This is a very important step because like measuring the results is an objective thing, right? It's like defining the correct metrics is crucial here. And then using this cycle of, evaluating yourself, you can understand whether the new ideas you're introducing, the new iteration of experiments is leading you to an improvement or not, right? So what they're actually putting here is an obligatory step, as well as like trying to outline a good baseline to compare to, which is normally like a good thing in computer science standard methodology. Some hyperparameter search. So it's like obligatory when you have a good solution, you kind of need to evaluate, different hyperparameters, do some hyperparameter search to make sure that you have done ablations correctly. And like you have, picked more or less reliable setup. Then there are other ablation studies regarding sometimes the architecture of the model, maybe some data pruning, some data analysis, some changing some important pieces of the whole pipeline. And then it all kind of iterates. So the step from 1 to 4, they iterate several times. And after all the research, like all the execution around like some ML experiments is conducted, they try to create a write-up. So there are some plots, analysis, evaluating the results, comparing all the experiments to the baseline. And then that is written in a form that's adjacent to like a NeurIPS paper, let's say. And then they also try to simulate reviewing a little bit. So all of that, it is like the paper write-up and the LLM reviewing is also the very nascent stage, as you can imagine. All of that is kind of standard methodology right now. So if you look at the benchmarks that are measuring the success of an agent like that, they are very, very similar to what you see here. So MLE bench is the benchmark of Kaggle competitions that the agents need to compete on. Once again, you're also like iterating over the same schema. You don't have the ideation stage, right? You are given the task and you're given the data set and the metric. So it's like you're just creating the plan and then you're executing and iterating over it. And you need the write-up as well. You just need a submission in the correct format, right? So all of that is kind of measuring the ability of agents to provide different meaningful ideas over a given task. It's not obligatory that the idea would be novel. It should be just executable, right? And like the agents should implement the idea in the code base, write the code, and then measure whether that was actual improvement and submit it. In the actual Kaggle competitions, I don't know how many of you have been, have you participated in Kaggle competitions? I don't know. Say yes if you have been competing before. I have been competing before when I was a student.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it, but yeah, always something.
Well, I think it was at peak some time ago, right? Maybe it's less popular right now, but like, I don't know, 10 years ago, that was a thing, right? People were like competing on Kaggle all the time, putting like Kaggle Grandmaster in their title, so that other people would know. So all of those people, like me included, we kind of, I don't know, we kind of contributed a little bit right now to the training of those AI research agents, just because all of that, all those trajectories and solutions from Kaggle are now used for agent training. So what's happening there, like for those who do not know, so in Kaggle, you are submitting your results, like basically the test set that your model has annotated, and you, like, depending on the results, the distribution of scores of other people, other competitors, you would be given the gold medal if, let's say, your solution is I don't know, in top 1% of all the submissions, and there will be also a silver medal if it's like in top, I don't know, 5%, and something like, I don't know, top 15% is a bronze medal. I might be wrong on the percentiles right now, but it's something like that. So you need to get to the top percentile with the best score with your solution, basically, right? And you're given the baseline there already, so it's like you have something to start with and to improve on. But the baseline could be really simplistic, right? Let's say it could be, I don't know, like a linear classifier, and instead you are deciding to fine-tune BERT, right? So that would be like something like that. And this is what agents are doing right now. And it looks like that a very specific type of scaffold has become very, very successful in that sort of setup. So one thing I just want to show you, this weird graph thingy here. So this is the graph of the experimental branches that the agent has completed during the stage of exploration, right? So this is interesting because this is actually what suits that sort of space very well. The agents right now are very successful on MLE bench-like, Kaggle-like tasks because they have mastered through that sort of scaffold as well, the ideation and exploration and execution of the experiments with branching. So you try something, you implement it, you measure the results, and then you have like 3-4 ideas on how to improve on top of that. And you create all of those and you run those in parallel, right? So sometimes you do that manually, right? The agent right now does that automatically. So maybe you run something, you run some idea, and it wasn't successful. Then you don't branch out of that. That node remains the final in this branch, right? But then if it was successful, then you branch again and you try to improve on top of that once more, and that creates this tree structure. So that's interesting. And when it was just implemented, that was a huge difference compared to just, one try or maybe just several tries in a row, like a linear logic when you just do one experiment in a row. So that's much more suitable, this, branch-like, repository-like structure that they have. And this is more or less the industry standard right now to use something like that. So right now, if you look at the updated results for MLE bench, you can see that it's pretty saturated already because for the scores of getting, always getting at least some medal, the success rate of the best agent is almost 63%. So this is very high score. That basically means that every time you run an experiment, like 63% of times, you have a medal. This is a superhuman performance. I don't think there are any Kaggle grandmasters that would be doing something like that. Mm-hmm. So how do we scale that? Can we scale that to other domains as well? If we can do that for Kaggle-like machine learning competitions? Well, there have been a lot of works recently doing exactly that, right? So Kaggle is, for computer science students, but maybe specifically if you have, some second domain you're interested in, maybe like your first major or a minor that you're interested in, like, I don't know, psychology, biology, physics, all of that right now is being incorporated into the same framework of automating experimental cycles. So many benchmarks, I've put them in those slides, are introducing very similar approach where the task is formulated for the agent to iterate on. And it's like a verifiable way to check for success. So it's like some sort of metrics and the data set that they're giving. And some task is formulated, like build a classifier on top of the data, or like build a predictor, build something that generates, new molecular structures sometimes even, right? It's like you just need to provide a verifiable way to test that. Mm-hmm. And this is how you do it. So right now, a lot of different domains are being incorporated. Not all the time they're very successful. So actual expert knowledge is something that's very, very in high demand here right now. So one of the best things that you could do right now, if you're interested in that domain and you want to do something for like another scientific domain you're interested in, is to formulate good, meaningful tasks for agents to iterate on. Because like nominatively, they kind of exist. But like I recently talked to a friend of mine who's in drug discovery, and I've shown him some of the tasks in drug discovery in those benchmarks, and he was like, well, that seems an artificial task for me. I would never form a task like that. So that's an interesting feedback, right? I don't know if that's, what 100% of drug discovery people would say, but generally you want something that would be useful for the community, right? So you want the agents to come up with some good solutions that the community would actually adopt in the end, right? Otherwise, it's just spending of compute. So generally, if you have ideas about like formulating new benchmark tasks in that setup, this is a very good thing that you can do right now. It will be, in very high demand. So what we tried to do with our colleagues last year and like the beginning of this year is we tried to include different types of those tasks in the same benchmark. So why would we do that in general? Because MLE Bench already exists, right? So MLE Bench has two significant flaws that we wanted to bypass by releasing something like that. So number one, as you can imagine, the distribution of scores for every Kaggle task is different. Sometimes it's more or less uniform, so actually making a large difference compared to the baseline gets you to top 1%, and this is a meaningful thing. But in a lot of cases, that doesn't happen. In a lot of cases, you see that the task is very saturated, and the whole distribution of scores is like within 95 to 98% accuracy, let's say, right? So you're adding your own results that are also pretty good, maybe like 97% accuracy, and you're not in top 10 solutions because it's so saturated, right? And that diverges very much across the tasks. So some tasks are very saturated and some are not. You probably just want unsaturated tasks because it doesn't make any sense to kind of compete on a very saturated task. It's already solved. The same thing is with contamination. So because Kaggle solutions, at least till 2022, have been mostly public, many tasks have been contaminated, or at least the agents and the base language models have seen those solutions during training. So you want to bypass that, and you want to have a new tasks that the language models definitely haven't seen during training. So dealing with that, we decided to kind of keep the same framework. So we still have this task formulation, and the data set and the metric, and the problem is always given to the agent. But the task sources are very recent papers. So we have been taking 100 scientific papers, computer science, like from different domains. There is some molecular DNA modeling there. There is NLP tasks, tabular data, multimodal now as well. So all of that is the source of a new tasks that are uncontaminated. So we took all the papers that have introduced something new, a new problem, a new task like that from 2024. And then for each of those, we also have calculated and we have found a paper that's claiming state of the art, like human state of the art on it. And here we don't give any baselines to the agent. So the agent is just given the task, no baseline. And the agent should bypass human SOTA. So that's the actual way of pushing the agent to kind of iterate and search for a better modeling solution that we're claiming here. So a very interesting part is actually with a good scaffold, sometimes even a relatively small LLM can do wonders. And as you can see on this figure here, it's like the distribution of like normalized scores, like how does it compare to human SOTA? So like this vertical line is human SOTA. It's like most of the final submissions of different models and scaffolds and like different agents, they don't compare to human SOTA, they don't bypass it, but some do. Like a few, like small percent of tasks is actually, bypassing human SOTA in reality. So that's interesting, right? Because it's a more strict, like a much stricter way of evaluating actual agentic performance. Let's exclude all contamination. Let's exclude, all the saturated tasks. Can an agent with a current language model actually bypass the best human claimed result in the very fresh new task? The answer is yes. Sometimes that happens. Is there anything new actually happening there? Well, surprisingly, not surprisingly, not so much, right? So all the good results very reliably come from just, a more sophisticated and more coherent experimentation. You do more ablations, you do more thorough data analysis, you do more thorough data cleaning, you explore hyperparameters, and you are basically pushing the existing architectures and existing models, all the tools that every other person already has to the maximum, right? So that's the goal in a sense. So this is what is actually happening here. So for like textual classification, where like let's say state of the art is 90%, the agent has actually bypassed that and like got fair 93%, being actually better without cheating. But the difference actually comes from a very similar architecture and just better hyperparameter search and better cross-validation. So, just having the thorough experimentation, sometimes when you have a lot of branches, it's like superhuman branching in a sense. So it's like more experiments that probably like is convenient for you to supervise, is actually making a difference. So that's interesting.
May I have a question?
Yes, please.
Then I was thinking about the very noisy data. So the question is, for this kind of research, what are the requirements for the data? How clean it should be? And
for the task itself, we don't limit, we don't restrict.
So you could
like
take
the task
like
just should be meaningful, right? If in reality this is what researchers face, so they have very noisy data, then this is how it is, right? This is exactly how we should give it to the agents.
Do you know any like EEG data, for example? We know this, right? And like uncleaned EEG data, it's very hard to tell which little peak is correlated with what. So
Yeah.
do they do these tasks do?
Well, I think in some of those benchmarks here somewhere, there's neuroscience data in Science Agent Bench already. I don't remember if it was EEG or maybe fMRI data, but that already is started. And I actually don't think that would be like a huge difference. I mean, of course, for any sort of neuroscience related modeling, there's just a lot of things that are left to do, right? So let's say for that sort of data, because they're very long dependencies, right? It's like temporal data. It's also very noisy, as you said, right? It's like we don't have a good transformer model, let's say, that would be trained on that sort of modality, and that would be predicting it very well, that would be modeling the whole sequence very well, right? So we don't have that. And moreover, we don't have the scaling laws. So we don't know a good law of, what data is enough. How does the architecture scaling works? How much compute do you need, and how long do you need to train the model so that the model will be reliable, right? The same, by the way, is with DNA data. And the same is with many other types of data. But this is somehow that I think that's a good task for the agent to do that. I think it's a good thing. Like ablations, scaling, all of that is like a good thing to be done automatically if you already can formulate the iteration loop for the agent to experiment on. For answering also to your question, we kind of don't limit the agents right now. Like even if the data is provided in the task, so please train on this data and test on this data, you can probably allow the agent to search for additional training data, right? So in a lot of cases, I think we try to restrict that just because if this paper is published, maybe the test set is also published, so the agent tried to search for the test set and then just use it, right? But you don't want the cheating part. You just want the agent to maybe search for additional data that's available for training to kind of add some more signal and then to use it once again to create a better model. So normally we don't restrict that.
Yeah,
once again, it's hard for me
to
kind of think of, there should be some, modification of transformer that would be working good on that sort of data. And it should be, I don't know if there's scaling laws. So I think establishing a scaling law is something that would be very, very crucial to starting that sort of adoption.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
This is how the agents perform with just this tree-like scaffold, like tree-like experimentation. And we were thinking, but what about, the cumulative improvements? We kind of expect the agent to iteratively improve the solution itself, but then maybe the scaffold that we use, this, management of the experimental states, those branches, maybe it's also suboptimal, right? And the scaffold itself, this logic that's built in, technically it has a lot of value, right? And has a huge influence on the model performance. How many branches do you allow? How long should the experiments run for before you stop them? All of that is defined by the logic that's in the scaffold. So maybe we should give the agent the ability to experiment over its own scaffold. Maybe it should be changeable, right? So this is what the authors of the Darwin-Gödel machine are doing. And they create this self-modifying logic where within this tree search, if there are some good results, not just within the solution that the agent has come up with, but also if it changes the code of its own logic and you evaluate it all together, you just keep this best scaffold and then you iterate over it. So this is a very interesting way of thinking. And the whole tree now looks like this. So you have different solutions, but you also have, different scaffolds that are changed over time, and you're evaluating all of that together. An interesting thing that you can see here is that greedy search would not work here, right? So, sometimes greedy search is the most, typical strategy here, but it's not all the time that the best solutions are the results of the previous best node, right? So sometimes you have the other way around. There is no improvement and it's like it gets worse, and sometimes it gets better. Here specifically, those are the results on the SVE bench, which is the coding benchmark with very verifiable metrics. Have you solved the task or not? But then working on that, we kind of thought what are the changes that are actually being introduced in that sort of lineage of experiments? Well, those are very interpretable, so that's a good thing. So the agents normally try to, work through the limitations of the base LLMs and introduce some hacks in the scaffold to work around it. For example, auto compaction of the context if the context gets very low, the context window is already filled in. Then it tries to introduce some memory in a lot of cases. It tries to introduce new tools and add new tools that are more suitable for the fine-grained analysis of the task results. So all of that kind of makes sense. All the meaningful changes in that sort of logic, they are meaningful. But then this is just for one task itself, right? So it's like we're basically over optimizing the whole system, the whole agent to just work good on one benchmark. Is it a good thing? Shall we try maybe, broader context? So this is what we introduced in the recent paper with the co-authors of Darwin-Gödel machine. So we tried to lift all of the restrictions that were introduced in self-modification, and it's like the agent now can change everything about its own scaffold, not just the prompts, the whole code base, introduce more and more tools. It can even change the language model itself, and it can introduce and download more language models to use. And we have also introduced the multitask objective. So the agent should become better, not just on one task and just hyper-optimize for it, but let's try to create a better scaffold that's just good for a wide range of tasks, including verifiable and unverifiable tasks, right? So the verifiable tasks is where you can have a very objective reward function or some sort of metric, like coding task, it's a yes or no. Is it executable or no? Did it work correctly or not? Math as well, was the answer correct in the end or not, right? But then for many tasks like scientific idea, novelty estimation, it's not a yes or no answer, right? Sometimes it's some sort of LLM judge that does that. So here specifically, the HyperAgents framework is designed to work with that sort of task as well. We don't care if it's a verifiable or unverifiable thing. Any sort of task can be added to the general batch of tasks for the agent, and the agent should improve itself to become better on a wider range of tasks. So this is how we formulated it. An interesting competing approach is presented by the authors of the work that's called Agent Archive. So they have created a simulation on a subset of archive papers where the agents are all separate, they're independent, they're all different, and they should just create this lineage of results by reading each other's results, reading each other's papers on one task. So this is not some sort of evaluative approach, like evolution of agent. No, it's like all different agents. And they just read each other's progress reports, and they try to introduce some changes on top of that, implement them, and this is the whole data point, right? So this also works. So for very specific problems with verifiable rewards, like my math 500, I think here is like relatively, not complex math benchmark right now. There's a solid improvement over time with the number of modifications that those papers have introduced. Mm-hmm. So having all that, can we say that, we actually can scale that up and, we'll have automated science now? What's preventing us from that? Do you have ideas?
If I may?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yes. So I'm sorry. Yeah. Basically, I was just thinking that tasks that are easily verifiable the boundary of true intelligence is constantly moving across the last 20 years, but the tasks that are easily verifiable and that have a clear criteria of success aren't really viewed as true intelligence anymore, because most of the science isn't like that. So you have to first invent something that can also convert unverifiable, unmeasurable tasks into well-defined, into something like Kaggle competition. And the second thing is, I guess, something that increases the resistance to uncertainties. Like in some situation when there is not clear what to do, at each stage, this kind of uncertainties, they accumulate and the final result isn't very good. So basically, this is probably something that should be addressed as well.
I agree with you. I like that answer. Yeah, that's a great idea. I probably will try to cover that a little bit from a different angle, but I really like how you framed it.
Okay.
The most complex problems probably because you don't have enough information to even think of that and create some sort of formulation. They're unverifiable. That's the thing, right? But then apart from that, we have some applied problems as well, right? So applied problem number one is that we just have a lot of AI slow papers right now, right? And then the rejection rates climb and then the conferences are collapsing. So it was the record on almost every AI conference this year. And last year, it was 30,000 submissions on URIPS, and it was 50,000 on CVPR. This is absolute historical maximum. It was never like that. And of course, the amount of experienced reviewers is not increasing with that pace at all, right? So we have a real human bottleneck of peer reviewing scientific results because of that. And generally, if that just continues, what you have is the quality of scientific reports that we have access to and the agents have access to is lowering, right? So the overall reliability is also lowering, and then reviewing standards are also lowering. So
if I may,
yes, please.
If I may ask a question, because I had it in my list of questions. So this is indeed a strong problem, and it is also a problem for grant evaluations. So basically, the number of proposals for getting grants is rising, and the reviewers do not know what to do with it because before they were rejecting everything that is not written smoothly enough, and now everyone submits something smoothly written by ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So basically, a question. Are there works or thoughts about how to address this with agentic AI? Maybe try to introduce, basically, if we have a lot of ideas and proposals sent by AIs, let's try to think how we can evaluate it with AIs, or at least do some preliminary clearing.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is a very, very strong problem that we have. It's actually, I want to just skip to that. Like, we were not doing very well with human reviewing at all before, right? It's not that like we have some very good reviewing procedures that are already in place. So statistically, and like this is what NeurIPS have been tracking before, like the human reviewings at NeurIPS give 80% random results. So it's like for top 5% of papers, it's more reliable. You'll have, like reviewers agreeing between each other and like agreeing to accept. For the bottom 15% as well, the reviewers will agree. But for the 80% of remaining papers that are in the middle, results are random. And this is a continuous trend. It has not improved over time. And now we even have more like AI slop papers. So like one of the things is just like some researchers just want to, kind of slow down. Let's try to, incentivize people to submit less publications. But then the obvious way of trying to deal with that is also let's try to maybe have some reliable AI tools to apply to help reviewers make that decision, right? So AI scientists in Sakana AI work, they try to do a very simplistic formulation of that. So just the text-based free-form review generation. So they just sampled the reviews for like their papers, and then they measured the correlation of those like scores and whether it's like accept or reject. That doesn't work too well, and this is like an expected outcome. Let's not try to optimize to just, have a correlation of automatic free-form review for our paper. This is a really bad signal, right? This is not actually grounded in anything. This is just a free-form generation of an LLM. So what can be actually used is a little bit of grounding on the actual standards. So we have, like, I'll try to skip a little bit just because I have a lot of slides and like I just want to cover this question in particular. That's important. So we have the author's checklist, right? And every time we submit to a major conference, you have to make sure that your paper, qualifies with all the important criteria. You have included limitations, you have included ethical statement, you have included the infra details, you have included the hyperparameters and ablation studies that you have done, right? So all of that is important also for reproducibility and everything, right? So at least this is something that we could use, and there are works to do that. So the work that we did with the colleagues just a few months ago is trying to also approach that through optimizing for the retroactive data. So we took the historical data of the papers that have been accepted to NeurIPS, ICLR, and some other conferences. Their reviews are also public data, and the scores are public data, so you can try to use that for your own needs. And you can also try to match that with how well the paper was adopted in the end. And for adoption, the best criteria that we can have right now is like not very good. I'm probably too conservative to say it's a good objective, but this is probably the best we could have is the citation score after 1 year, right? So what we try to do is a two-step optimization with an agent looking at, first of all, the criteria that reviewers have been using, starting with this NeurIPS paper checklist, and agent through the loops of self-improvement, try to rewrite those authors' checklists and guidelines for reviewers in a way that it is much more correlated with the actual outcomes of the reviews and success and like the overall citation score in the end. So it turns out that it doesn't require like a lot of change in terms of like the actual criteria high level, but within the lower level criteria, there are very specific things that are much more correlated with the actual results of the review. If you like regenerate and then try to measure correlation and then regenerate again. So all of those are not written in the author's guidelines, in the reviewing guidelines, but are very important to, in the end, for the correlation with the outcome of the review and the adoption. So it's the problem scope. It's like, is it too broad or is it too narrow? Is it trivial? It's the motivation. Is there like compelling justification? It's does the work open up entirely new directions of research? It's does the work have the potential to influence or to be adopted by other fields? Like all of that, like in the appendix of this paper, we have all of those. There are actually 60 criteria like that. And they, while being put in the system prompt for the agent to review, are creating the review that's actually correlated reliably with human judgment and adoption of the paper.
May I have
so I'm not saying this is the like how it should be done. Like this year, I'm participating in the NeurIPS experiment. So NeurIPS organizers once again are doing a statistical experiment on the paper submissions. And this year, there is an experiment with AI-assisted reviewing. The authors can opt out. So when you will be submitted, or you have submitted already, you probably have seen like, do you opt in or do you opt out? Like for your paper to be used in the experiment. And like with the papers that opted in, we'll try to have, several groups of reviewers. One that will be without any assistance, one that will be AI assisted without like just a free form generation, and the third that will be using structured generation AI assistance. So it will be an interesting result to see how that would be working.
May I have a question on that?
Yes.
Doesn't adoption introduce a bias? So, because it really depends not only on scientific value of a paper, but also on kind of fashion in the field now, on the author itself and his or her connection.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I think a good thing probably is like it should be kind of normalized by some sort of things that you've mentioned. It could be normalized, right? You can do that. Apart from citation scores, like you can use the H indexes of the authors, to try to normalize it probably. If we want to go outside of computer science, this will be important because other domains have very different distribution of citations compared to computer science. I would say in computer science, there is like this growing inequality of the popular labs always getting a lot of citations, and then just a random PhD paper is not getting a lot of attention, right? So, yeah. And in different scientific fields, I think it's very different, and like the distribution is kind of different. So this is definitely, a place where it could be normalized. I'm also, but in general, that kind of saves you from, a nicely written paper that nobody actually used after a year, right? If this paper was published, it was accepted, and then in the end, after a year, there's no work that actually found it useful and referenced it, maybe it's not a good work.
Well, can I add to that? Sorry, just to jump in on this. This reminds me very much of the early attempts by Amazon to automatize CV screening of applicants, and we all know how this ended up. In the end, they ended up discriminating and biasing strongly results against women because, of course, the historical data were skewed towards men. Mm-hmm. A few years ago. So if you're using a metric, which we know from many research that is highly problematic per se, citation counts, bibliometric indexes, the DORA framework, for example, explicitly tries to forbid the usage of this kind of metrics to evaluate research quality. If you're baking that into an automated system, I think you're just perpetuating bias and making things much worse, actually. So, you are exchanging what should be counted, what can be measured. I don't think this is completely wrong as an approach, just wrong.
I don't agree with you. I understand your argument 100%, I think as a pipeline, this is much better than just a free-form generation trying to match the review scores with sampling LLM reviews. And I think it's much more grounded in something. Also, it's
in something wrong. That's my point. My point is that it's grounded in something wrong. You have to choose the right metric. If you choose the wrong metric, you're optimizing for something. Of course, yeah, you can show that your figure of merit goes up, but you're optimizing the wrong thing.
I can optimize for anything.
Yeah, and you'll be wrong. I agree. You can optimize.
So this is very interpretable thing. It's like you can look into the specific things that are correlated with this metric. There are no things that are correlated with it actually that would say, is this the work from the famous lab? No, there's no such question that's correlated with this metric. And that's a good thing. All those quality criteria that are in there are very, very interpretable, and they're actually very useful. I think if I, as a student, when I was a student, would see something like that, to ask myself about my research project, that would be super useful. This is a pretty fair procedure.
Wait, but didn't you say that the citations were really strongly related to how famous the lab is and so on? Then it's not really fair, right?
So once again, right, it's like you're trying to optimize through giving the very specific criteria to the LLM to evaluate in your paper. Those criteria are extracted from the overall generational result of the 10 years of paper reviewing for the top conferences. Does that data incorporate bias? Yes, 100%. Every type of bias. But if you look at it, of the actual criteria that are extracted from it, those 60 criteria that are extracted are very much high quality scientific advice to evaluate your own idea, right? Probably that would be also, you can say, this is not a good criteria because that kind of pushes people to think for grandiose projects, it should be always, opening up new avenues of research. Not every research should be like that. Yes, that's also sort of bias.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think maybe we should move on because this is very, I know.
I love that. No, thanks so much for having this discussion.
This is painful, right, for us, but yeah.
I get it 100%. It's like, I'm not saying that should be what should be implemented. I think that's an interesting piece of results that we got here. And I'm interested in what will be the new RIPS experiment result this year as well. So yeah, maybe just a couple quick comments on the methodology itself, right? So generally, in computer science as well, we have a lot of problems regarding the very basic scientific methodology things like reproducibility, verifiability, falsifiability criteria, and we cannot say that we're actually modeling the actual processes in science right now with that sort of thing because it's too simplistic and it's introducing a lot of simplifying a more complex thing that it actually is. For reproducibility, we sometimes look at other fields and we think, computer science is much better. It should be much more, reproducible. We have the code, we have this auto checklist. It should be very good. What are your bets? What is the percent of reproducibility in the computer science, machine learning papers right now? In
45.
How much?
45.
Okay, 45.
Less.
Less. Who's voting for more? More than 45. Okay, you're not very certain. Okay. Psychology is around 40%, right? And after the open collaboration where people actually have agreed to follow very specific protocols, right? So right now it's 48%. So you're very close, actually. So that's based on the meta-analysis of different machine learning papers. And most of that actually comes from different important details that are omitted in the papers. So it's what exactly was the test set? Was it on cross-validation? Was it on validation set? What exactly were the hyperparameters? What was used during training? So all of that kind of amplifies the papers and the details. Even if the code is available, it's not enough to reproduce. Apart from that, with the verifiability and falsifiability, there are also some questions, of course, right? So for verifiability, we can say that we always have like the metrics on the test sets. So that's probably like the most heavily reliant one. We have the benchmarks with those test sets. Sometimes we have some logs attached, so that we could, investigate them. But then what would be the falsifiability in those research? That would be ablation studies, some sort of generalization studies, maybe some data leakage, memorization, contamination studies, actually testing for limitations, or sometimes just publishing negative results. Like this is happening really rarely. If you take a random computer science paper, there will be no ablation studies, right? And there will be no test for leakage. There will be very weak limitation studies, maybe like one paragraph, right? That's kind of introducing a lot of difficulties to say that, if every paper will have its code base, like the agents will be able to create an ecosystem with, this superhuman speed run to progress. No, that's not happening because of that, right? And overall, like the scientific process is much more complex than that, right? I think there are different scientific paradigms that we have, right? It's like there are some core principles in every field that we know of, that we use, that we base from, right? A language model is not using that. That's just a statistical machine. So if you want your, agent to be specifically grounded on some scientific paradigm, there's no way of doing that right now, right? And specifically, there's no way for a language model to actually create a new paradigm in this field, right? So you cannot come up with a new transformer architecture because of that. And of course, it's like a lot of work, I would say more Feyerabend, like just because, it's like they're just testing random things, like various ideas, the more the better, but then in the end, it's like very, very random ideas without methodological strictness. So all of that exists. And this whole scientific evolution that's actually complex, that's happening right now, it's not at all reflected in this scientific agents cooperation. It doesn't happen right now, right? So I think a lot of, like a huge gap within the knowledge that we have as scientists is just something that's not introduced there. And will it be introduced? It would be interesting to see, right? But it's a very complex thing. It's a very complex modeling exercise to kind of try to think of how to model science at scale. And I think it's an important thing. One interesting thought I'd like to introduce, which I try to map to the progress of scientific agents, is the 3-tier system, right? So you can have an agent that is just very good at conducting exact experiments when you give it the exact conditions, the data set, the metric, and it can iterate. And we call it like paradigm internal validator. So it works just within the paradigm that you've given it. Then there is a paradigm internal discoverer. Let's say when the agent can come up with some new important edits and primitives that are completely new. Like let's say if you would still give it a task to train a small language model on a specific data set, and it comes up with a new type of layer or like a new type of attention, that starts to happen right now, but it's very hard to model once again. It's like, of course, the agents should just sample from the existing distribution. So is something like that out of distribution? Like, how do we define that? How do we define scientific novelty there? It's a very complex task. So that's very real. This is very nascent. And then the 3rd tier, hopefully someday we have it as like the paradigm innovator, right? So what are the conditions in which an agent or a multi-agent system like that can come up with a new transformer architecture, something completely new, probably then you can say, oh, maybe this artificial general intelligence. And this completely does not map to this original way of thinking about the complexity of tasks for AI research agents, right? So this is mostly heavy software engineering related framework. Of course, it captures the progress of the agents currently, but apart from the software engineering, it doesn't reflect at all the complexity of the scientific environment that we have. And it doesn't actually show the progress around paradigm internal discovery, where actually interesting things happen right now from time to time. It's like if you can read, I don't know, like OpenAI model has, proposed a new solution to a math problem or something like that. This is tier 5. Well, most of the agents right now are just tier 1. They just can iterate over the experiments correctly 50% of time. So yeah, hopefully someday we'll be there. Hopefully we'll work and speed up our own work with agents in the correct way, and hopefully finally we'll have some better scientific discoveries, maybe even with agents. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this talk. This super dense in information. I will have to rewatch it again. I don't know with the dictionary sometimes. And anyone has questions apart from me?
Yes, but I will let you go first.
Thank you. I was just, because we just talked about that yesterday, about many of these topics. And my question is about, I don't know the English word for that, but Tatiana will understand me, Castelli. Like in...
Tax, yeah.
So it introduces, in my work, when I'm coding with models, it introduces a lot of that, and I'm working with rare linguistic data, like making a corpus of dialects, and then I need to annotate it syntactically, and then when I normalize my data, it introduces a lot of these things. So it doesn't make generalization, even when it's possible, even if I give it a rule, it prefers this way of doing. And but the output, it looks correct before I add new data. So, and only I add new data, I can discover that it was Castile if I don't look at the code. Mm-hmm. So how do I prevent this happening? It's a very practical question, but
yeah, I think it's very applied. But like I would say that an improvement over the long context window partially will solve it. So because the context window for most of the models right now is in between like 200,000 tokens and maybe 500,000 tokens, the multi-file reasoning is not working very strongly. So to prevent the hacks is like what you can see is like the model is not reusing the code that's already written in your project, right? It's just introducing new slop code that's complementary. It's like it's duplicating the logic, it's like not importing things correctly when it could be just an import from another file. So all of that's not working very good, but and it's very, very expensive in terms of computation to make long context work good. So I think for the foundational model developers, they kind of try to avoid that, or maybe just try to, deal with that through some other means, because just the long context training itself is just very expensive. And it also affects the latency, right? So it's like, if you make the context window work well in today's solutions, it will be just also slower.
Yeah, but slower is okay, just because I don't have enough data and I don't have gold data to train it on. But so
I mean, because we are all creating data for them, using those products, I think eventually it will become much better.
Okay. Hopefully. Thanks.
Maybe in like 4 months, 6 months, something like that.
Well, we don't speak dialects, right? So the data is limited because we speak standard, more or less. Oh, I don't speak Slovenian at all. Yeah. Alex?
I mean, maybe someone else has questions because I have several. Okay. Nikki, go on, please.
Hey, yes. I'm wondering, because you say, hopefully the AI can become innovators and like win a Nobel Prize. But like, what for you would be your end goal? Like, do you want them to replace scientists, or like, what is your thought behind kind of wanting to achieve that?
No, I don't want to replace scientists. Like hopefully I'm a scientist myself, right? I want to live in the society where we use, the means of scientific progress for science, right? This is the obvious means of scientific progress that can be applied. And I want it to be applied in a methodologically correct way. There are some other bottlenecks that we haven't discussed today that are like real life bottlenecks that are preventing a lot of the things to happen at scale. For example, infrastructure scarcity, just the high price of infrastructure and inferencing good models, right? But I would love to see the scientific field scaling and, trying more approaches, trying more ideas at the same time. Some things are hard to find, and some parts of, my experimental search, I would love to accelerate through that sort of means. I'd love to be able to run like not 5 experiments in a row, but 500 experiments in a row. And cumulative effect of compounding this new knowledge would lead us to a much higher speed of scientific progress. That's what I'd love to see.
If I may chime in, because indeed we just yesterday had several talks specifically on agentic AIs in science. So I understand where these questions actually come from. So one of the things that we were discussing, and it's a common sentiment, is somewhat a fear that what is going to be our role if AI at some point can not just do this kind of routine experiments, but also generate new ideas. If it can do it, then it usually, if AI can do something, it usually can do something faster and maybe even better than humans. So if it can also go to this direction, what is our role and what is still our joy if we know that we are obsolete, essentially?
Once again, it's like I'd like it to be my assistant in the way that, let's say, when you did your PhD, right, it's like you have been an expert in a very specific field, right? It's like there may be a few hundred works that are very bright in your memory right now, but then 5 years will pass, you'll do some other research, maybe you'll pivot in another research direction, and you will lose this bright memory of those 500 works. The agent will not, right? I'd like to have this tool like an external memory for myself, let's say, to be able to manage that. I always say, this what is scientific superhuman intelligence that exists right now? This is a well-organized research institution, right? So a group of scientists that are talking, that are well-organized, are already much stronger than a research scientist themselves, right? And then there is the new way of tooling that you can give to the institutions itself to have another multiplier on top of that. This is how I see that.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Can I? Yeah, I think we monopolized too much this discussion. But so if somebody just kick us out, and my question is, if I may come back to the bias. But now I'm not that interested in how fair the bias is to us scientists. I'm more interested how fair the bias is to the scientific field, because if something is established, and good labs are interested in that, and then of course everybody's citing them. It was a situation for some years that women's health was not very much studied, right, comparing to men's health. So, and there are much more quality work in men's health. So of course we would go, there is quality work, so we can amass quality works in there, and there is not so much quality work in women's health, so we will abandon it altogether. So I know this is extreme example, but just that But this doesn't happen with even smaller topics?
I think it does, right? This is like some bias that exists there. And I think there's like, it's not the problem of tooling. This is the problem of motivation. This is the problem of, regulation as well, legislation. So all of that should be changed on the level of like legislation. Because in terms of, as far as I understand this, like I am not an expert in like the medical field, but like as far as I know, this issue also partially comes from the companies, like the private companies that are funding the research, this like capitalist structure of funding, like evaluating the importance of the specific domains. It comes from the idea that if you don't include women in your control group, you don't have to you don't have to include additional factor analysis, which is like the changing hormonal cycles, which is very important, and then it's completely omitted as a factor.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And then it's more expensive, so they just try to bypass that and skip that completely. Right. So that should be like the legislation. You shouldn't be able to do that. You shouldn't be able to skip and just, omit important factors to bypass legislation.
Right, but if the situation is that we are all using help of the AI, which we all do, even if we don't talk about that much, so we kind of introducing this bias, if it's only based on data, because it's not based on laws very often, right? We all introduce this bias to our work. Silently, kind of, right? And it's not always about men and women, but sometimes it's about fruit flies and worms.
And all of that, I think, is already introduced in language models themselves, right? The language model is like a statistical machine, right? It doesn't actually know anything, right? And it's like all of that data, like historical studies, they have been put probably in the training already. Right, so there's no difference between like a lower quality study and like a higher quality study. Like, this is a bad thing in general, right? It's not just within science, it's in like everything, like, internet people's opinions, right? Like all of that is in there. And I think it's like specifically like being very precise in the task formulations, being very precise at actually looking into the data and creating the tasks that are designed to check for that is the most important thing right now.
Okay.
Right? So like technically, like if you are creating like a benchmark for agents in that field, right? You can include that as the blocker for, a success criteria or something. Right.
Right. If I'm thinking about it, but if I'm taking a ready-made reviewer helper, for example, so my question is it somehow does somebody think about to put it into the tools, something against this bias?
We should, right? It's like it should be like the part of the author's checklist or something like that, right? It's like it looks like an unverifiable reward. To me, right? So this is like a little bit like, it's not an objective criteria, but it's like a yes or no criteria still that could be checked over like the study text. I was thinking of like, there could be a benchmark as well. It's like of how well let's say the agent can do meta-analysis, for example. I think nobody has checked for that. So you have, let's say, the meta-analysis papers, and you have the actual papers that are cited there, right? And like, let's say you trust those meta-analysis, those are high quality, right? So can an agent reproduce that? Can it reproduce like a real unbiased summary of the results in different studies? Or like, does it completely like bullshit through? I think that would be an important thing to check here, like around like the text itself, like how well does the model operate with the scientific text? With my experience with just scientific texts, they are like just the whole like extraction of information from the scientific language heavy texts is still a challenge, right? So it's not working too good. Specifically for like linguistic grammars, It's like if you try to, let's say, upload a linguistic grammar in the context of ChatGPT and ask something meaningful about what's actually described in that grammar, it will be really low quality response.
I know. Yeah, I'm doing that.
So that is still also like a huge issue. So it's not just the bias, it's the bias plus hallucination that you're getting.
Yeah.
I actually have two questions that are kind of related. Unless someone, because indeed we're monopolizing box.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good with that. It's like...
as long as we don't take too much...
Please unmute yourself, yeah, if you have more questions, just you're free to ask things.
Okay. 3, 2... Too late. Okay. My two questions, so are kind of related to this. First is that indeed, coming back to the topic that maybe if we are trying to develop some kind of reviewer or meta-analysis harness, then at some point we definitely introduce biases just because of the texts that were represented in the training corpus, just because of the texts that were used for creating the biases, the benchmarks. So first, my question, from my experience, the current models are still pretty weak in terms of realizing that they have limitations. It is getting better. But in my experience, at least, so I'm an astronomer, so I'm astronomer with some machine learning background. I was trying to see how agentic setups are working on astronomical tasks, and I see that what sometimes it is doing, it is doing some branch of experiments, it's hitting a wall, it's figuring out that the result is not good enough, it switches to another branch without trying to analyze why I failed there. So I had kind of a hypothesis, I tried to set up an experiment, it failed, no thinking why it didn't work. Do you think it is... thinking, no attempt of an analysis. Do you think this is still something that has to be fixed with harness, with scaffolding, maybe like a separate step in the AI scientist scheme, or is it something that we still need to challenge on the level of LLM models?
That's a good question. Yeah, so in the short term, I'd say fixing it with a scaffold, something like hyperagents-like, is absolutely would do the job. So this is exactly what we tried to force the whole system to do. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of waiting, but it's meaningful changes in the end. Mm-hmm. So maybe like you as a human, you would see what's not working. You would come much faster to this understanding of what needs to be changed. Mm-hmm. But in the end, that kind of works. Mm-hmm. Then the scaffold versus the model is an interesting question. I would say that those are two competing directions where everything first comes to the model, and then the scaffold is makeup on top of the model itself, right? So everything that we know is not working with the base model is fixed with a scaffold. Then the model authors see what people are fixing with a scaffold, and they generate a lot of agentic trajectories in those scaffolds, like fixing those behaviors and putting that back into training. Mm. And then this is the cycle in a sense. So the thing with scaffolds is that very, very diverse, right? So you probably don't want to have a lot of contradicting types of scaffold in your training, so you have to pick industry standard. That's why it's important still to have some sort of industry standard, and it changes from time to time. Mm-hmm. So let's say 2 years ago it was React, it was a linear loop. Mm-hmm. Then at some point it was Monte Carlo tree search. Right now this is this open claw thingy, right? So it's it kind of every 6 months it kind of changes, and foundational model training people, they have to look at the old data, shovel it off, shovel in new data with the new agentic scaffolds, fixing the new things that have been discovered to not be working. So but in the short term, fixing it with a scaffold is absolutely a thing.
I mean, the benefit of a scaffold that basically anyone can invent it and something of your own, unlike retraining the model, which is a big lab task.
Yeah, absolutely. But then it's more expensive in terms of inference. So when you have something fixed in the model itself, it's like you need to do less iterations. Ideally, it's just one step and you get to the result. And then the scaffold introduces a lot of like token spend.
Yeah, okay. My another question was also somehow related to the reviewing and trying to create a better AI scientist. So one thing that I'm also always interested, okay, we can create a better AI scientist, but what I would be primarily interested in inventing something that makes me a better scientist, so that improves my understanding or improves my speed of thinking and so on and so forth. So one thought about that and about also reviewing process is, are there works that try to kind of create maybe something like a multimodal or somewhat multimodal regime for LLMs for extracting concept maps, let's say, from the raw text and trying to analyze the content of the paper on that level and their connection and their similarity to other papers. So, okay, if we have a submission, can we identify the key thoughts? Can we see how they are connected, whether this connection makes sense for a human, and whether it is similar to other works in this area, and how it maybe is tied to potential works in other areas? Not to replace human judgment, but to create this map that helps a human to make this judgment. Which is a confused explanation, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, one of I think that this is doable. Nobody, as far as I know, is particularly working on something like that. But at least for like math related things that have math and physics, for example, there have been some studies. I think that people were trying to frame this issue as like, let's try to find very similar formulations or like, some math apparatus in different domains of math and physics, and let the actual physicists try to understand why they are actually related, right? Why is there something similar that's going on there? So that could be done, right? Because this is like some lean-like language that you have, you can extract it and like you can do like embedding similarity on it, and that will work. If it's just text and like, let's say the formalism is different, that's much more complex. So maybe we can connect other domains for sciences through math right now, but through language, that's more difficult.
Because it kind of seems like an obvious attempt. If I'm reading a proposal and I'm trying to evaluate whether it's similar to others, and there are a lot of details that I'm trying to extract the key points, and I'm trying to compare these key points to key points from other papers. So it's kind of, it's less about trying to evaluate the novelty and the relevance from raw text, but trying to extract the skeleton, and then say a human is looking at it and thinking, okay, do I like it, or is it something that I've seen 1,000 times?
I think what you're describing right now is not formulated, like formally for the agents to work with. I think this is something that I would even say that this is some sort of like researcher's taste that you acquire through years of working in the field, right? So this is very different compared to just a similarity, because similarity will give you a lot of irrelevant results here. It's like it will not match your intuition in the sense you'll say, no, this is not what I wanted. So this intuition thing, or like, I don't know, taste, what is an interesting idea, what's not, what was reflected before. Sometimes it's, you recall some older paper that people just don't know about, right? And that was discussed in the 80s or in the 60s. It's not working very good right now, no.
But this is kind of, it is interesting that you're talking about intuition, because I was thinking exactly about creating something like a more or less objective extractor of key concepts that would just be placed on a map or a descriptor or whatever. I mean, I'm thinking about a concept map because it is an obvious analogy, and then the idea is exactly that you might not know or not remember about the paper from the 80s, but the core ideas, the relation between the core ideas would say, let's take this and try to add a loop and let's try to create something that eventually turns out to be a transformer, let's say.
I get it. I absolutely get it 100%. So in reality, how that turns out technically is that imagine you have this, like, let's say all the papers, right? And like they have the text, they have like the math apparatus, they have like maybe, right? And let's even take, I don't know, let's take Schmidt-Huber as an example, right? He always claims that he has invented everything that was invented later, right? It's like it's already was in his paper from like 95 or something, right? It's like how that works in reality is like because the formalism has changed over time, right? The way you're describing similar ideas, you're describing them in a different way with a different language that we have now. Computer science frameworks, like the papers and like how people write about their experience have become much, much more standardized compared to how it was in the 60s and the 80s. Recent papers are much more similar to each other than the older papers are to each other and to the new papers.
So it's a problem of pattern recognition on a concept level.
The problem of the embedding space, right? If we're using some sort of embedding space on top of the language or the formalism, we need to rework it.
Okay.
But that's an important issue, yeah.
I see, Nikki. I think that I'm done for now. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I was also just curious about your personal experience, because I guess that you've been working with these models for a long time and quite intensively. Like, do you notice a difference in your own way of working, like both the enjoyment, but maybe also like mentally how you approach it, and maybe certain skills like being able to concentrate, focus, doing deep work, if that has changed somehow using these models? Maybe it's a bit soon to say, but yeah, just any of your experiences.
No, I don't know. So one thing probably is like I became more efficient in a sense as a scientist. I still come up with all of the like ideas myself. I don't trust like AI generated ideas, and I kind of never use that to kind of work with the ideas. I just have like some backlog, and that's what I use. And like maybe like the students as well, like we kind of brainstorm things. But then for the experiments themselves, I think there's a negative side to it, definitely, which is like your attention spreads so much, right? So if you are now able to run a lot of experiments in the background, or it's like you can open, I don't know, several Cloud codes and like all of them will be working, right? Like I use a Cloud code setup with the Quen model on my local machine at home, for example, so I don't pay for that. But like, let's say I'm running like 5 experiments at a time, my attention is spread so thin. I think it is also like a more intensive work that you need to do in terms of like not losing the context, actually. So that's, I'm not ready, and I think the language models are not there yet enough to kind of trust them with the results. There are still like a lot of hallucinations. Still, like the direction can go in a way that you methodologically do not approve, right? So it's like I want to control the whole process, and it's like just running more experiments at the time reaches my own like human bottleneck of me analyzing the results.
I have very similar problem, I must say, and that's not good.
Oh, that's an interesting time. Yeah.
Exactly. I wonder how different we will be in several years from us like a couple of years before. That's.
But doesn't it feel also like less fun if you're constantly evaluating results and like reviewing instead of making things yourself?
We do make self.
No, I'm fine with that. I don't know. It's like I've been like, but you're also like delegating a lot of things anyway, right? So it's like if you're working in a group, like you're doing that all the time.
I think
Yeah, I
that
guess
for
just
astronomers,
from-
it's
Yeah,
maybe less common experience to delegate a lot, because I don't know how about Nike. I rarely delegate. A lot of stuff that you do on your own, or you did on your own.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I guess I'm just comparing like writing code yourself versus like checking someone else's code or like checking the AI's code. And then I find it less fun to go into someone else's code.
No, that's true. It's just like probably it's like it has some time investment in it, but like if you set up like the skills and like just spend more time in trying to configure it in the way that it should work, it's becoming a little bit better in a way that at least like it writes the code in a way that you like it more. But then in the end as well, I don't know, I've never been like, I could never say that I'm a really strong engineer, let's say, right? And for me, that kind of lowered the stress level of starting something new. So that's probably like a good thing. Or it also like imagine like you have a lot of things on your like to-do list, you want to do a lot of things. And sometimes it also kind of infuses some sort of stress. Oh, I'm late to like within my own time schedule. I wanted to have that done already. I still haven't, right? And it's like, it also kind of lowers the level of stress that I have just working through the list as well, in a sense. Like,
but the list keeps growing. if you do more things and there are more things on your
then I
list.
have the list of lists, but this is it was always like that, yeah.
Yeah. So, anyone else has questions? Because it's like we are taking quite a lot of your time.
No, thank you very much. It was actually like such a pleasure to have that discussion. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. I think that's fantastic. And may I ask you for slides? Because in the very beginning,
Yes.
I think I messed up a little bit with the recording.
Yeah,
so
I will send you the deck so you'll have it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
And
Thank you. Have a good Friday.
Oh, we will.
You too.
And have a good weekend. And hope to see you again somewhere sometime. So listen to it. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks a
Thank you
lot.
so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.